Do you need a heating mat to start seeds? Will they grow better seedlings? Now, I see a lot of people using them online, and lots of people recommend that you should get one, but do you really need it? I'm going to discuss that in this video. I'm also going to discuss a problem I see a lot. People are using the heating mat incorrectly, and that's leading to leggy seedlings. What is a heating mat? Here's one I have, the Ready Heat from Phytotronics. They were good enough to send this to me so I could try it out, and I did a review video of this. It's basically some plastic with embedded heating wires that are connected to a wire that you plug in the wall. When you plug it in, this thing gets warm. Now, some of the systems come with a thermostat, so you can actually control the temperature that you're using. Why would you use one of these? One of the claims I've seen is that wet soil evaporates the water, and that evaporation cools down the soil. So what you're really doing is you're taking your seed, putting it into wet soil, that's cooling it down and slowing down germination. And that's why we need to heat this. Now that does make some sense. When you come out from swimming, your body's covered in water and it evaporates, and that cools you down. But how much does it really cool down this soil? A number of years ago, I did a test to see how this really works. And you can read the details of that on my blog post on gardenmyths.com. Here, I'm just going to give you this summary. I took pots with wet soil in them and other pots with dry soil in them. And I did lots of controls to make sure these measurements were done correctly. What I found was no difference in the temperature of those two soils. Wet soil is not cooler than dry soil. I also wanted to measure the difference in temperature between the pot of soil and the air around the pot. What I found was that the pot itself was about 0.5 degrees centigrade warmer than the air around it. Now, 0.5 degree is not significant for gardeners. It's clear to me that there's no point in using a heating mat because your soil is wet. That's just a myth. The main reason for using a heating mat is that it speeds up germination. Many seeds will germinate faster if we give them a bit of heat. Here's some scientific data that shows the germination rate of 4 different kinds of seeds. You can see that the profiles are all a little different. Every seed reacts differently to temperature. But you can also see that the profiles are fairly similar. If we have a look at the one in the bottom left corner, we can see that the germination rate is highest at 28 degrees. That's the center of that curve. But if we look at temperatures a little lower than that and a little higher than that, anything from 20 degrees to 37 degrees will give us pretty good germination. Certainly good enough germination for most gardeners. What we learned from this is that there's a range of temperatures that will give us good germination. But there is an ideal temperature for most seeds. Vegetable seeds have been studied quite extensively, and you can find the preferred temperature ranges for most of them. But let's have a look at a few examples. My basement is about 20 degrees centigrade or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, tomatoes take about 8 days to germinate. If I used a heating mat and increased the temperature by 18 Fahrenheit degrees to 86 Fahrenheit, 30 degrees centigrade, they would germinate in 6 days, a difference of 2 days. The most recommended temperature range for tomato seeds is somewhere between 75 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The other thing to notice from these profiles is that as temperatures get too hot, seed germination drops. And that's one of the dangers when you use heating mat. You have to make sure you don't overheat the seeds. Peppers are another vegetable that takes a bit of time to germinate. Peppers will germinate in 12 days at a lower temperature and 8 days at a higher one, a difference of 4 days. Seeds in the melon family also like higher temperatures. These are things like cucumbers, muskmelon, and watermelon. Now, so far I've been talking about vegetables, but what about flowers and trees and shrubs? Well, those seeds behave the same way. Each seed has a preferred germination temperature, but each seed can be germinated at a fairly wide range of temperatures. But if the temperature is too low, you get very slow germination, and if it's too high, you might even kill the seeds. The real benefit of using a heating mat is that it can increase the temperature in your home to that maximum best temperature. That will speed up seed germination. An important question you need to ask is, if I save 2 days on germination or 4 days, is that really a benefit? Is it worth having a heating mat to save a couple days? Do you need a thermostat with your heating mat? Some heating mats are sold without them, and others have that as an option. Sometimes they're built into the heating mat. But is this something that you need? Well, it is a handy device. It allows me to adjust the temperature of the heating mat so that I get the right temperature in my pots. If I don't have a thermostat, what I can do is take the pot of soil, put it on the heating mat, and measure the temperature. If it's too high, I simply raise it up an inch or so. That will cool down the soil. Remember, we're measuring the soil temperature, not the temperature of the heating mat. If the heating mat isn't giving me enough warmth, I can cover it with a dome of some sort, and that will increase the temperature of the pot. Now, doing those things is a little extra work, but it does mean that you don't have to buy a thermostat. Let's look at some other claims that are made for heating mats and see how realistic they are. Some people say that a heating mat will produce better plants. That's simply not true. A heating mat speeds up germination, but it does not produce better plants. Some people confuse the idea of growing plants warm with the idea of using heating mats. Remember, heating mats are for germination, not for growing the actual plant. If a plant needs to grow warm, you need to warm up all of the air around the plant, and a heating mat is not efficient for doing that. Some people claim that vegetable seeds can only germinate when the temperature is in the right range. Again, that's a myth. That's not really correct. You've seen in the temperature profiles that seeds germinate in a wide range of temperatures. Here's some advice that used to be correct but is no longer valid. If you want to warm up your seeds, put them on top of your fridge. Well, in the olden days, refrigerators were built such that the cooling system was at the top, and the top of a fridge was always warm. Newer refrigerators are built differently, and that warm area is actually at the back of the fridge, not at the top. So that advice doesn't work anymore, unless you have a really old fridge. Now I'd like to talk to you about one of the biggest mistakes I see people making with heating mats. They use them to germinate the seed, and that's okay. But once the seed sprouts, once you see some little green tip coming above the soil, you need to take them off the heating mat. You want higher temperatures for germination and lower temperatures for growing the seedlings. Too many people grow their seedlings warm, and that leads to leggy seedlings. Should you use a heating mat to start your seedlings? Well, I think this depends very much on the conditions you have. Most basements nowadays are warm enough to germinate the seeds without a heating mat. And you can always bring those pots upstairs in your living area where it's a little warmer. And as soon as they germinate, put them down in the basement where it's cooler. Where a heating mat can be very beneficial is when you're trying to germinate seeds in a very cold spot. If it's just too cold to germinate there, the heating mat helps. Do you need a heating mat? No, you don't. I've been sprouting seeds for over 40 years. I've grown over 2,000 species of plants from seeds. I've never used a heating mat. Now my basement is cool, but it's not super cool. And everything germinates just fine there. Well, what about this idea of speeding up the germination process? My tomato seeds germinate in 8 days instead of 6 days. My peppers take a couple days longer too. But I'm a gardener. I can start those seeds a couple days earlier. I'm not in a rush. In fact, let's be honest, in springtime, we can't wait to start those seeds, and most of us are actually germinating them too early. The cost of buying a heating mat is probably not worth it just to save a couple days. My recommendation is that you don't need one unless you have to germinate your seeds in a really cold place. If you want to learn about some other myths about starting seeds, have a look on my video right here. It'll save you money.